All right, I'm seeing thumbs up mark from the left wall, so let's get started. It's still 1 minute past 5 by my synchronized clock. All right, I'm Petri Malmelin, will be facilitating the AI Monday. This is not the first time I'm standing on this stage, but I think we have a really fascinating topic today. It's about Data Act and AI Act in Europe, and we have four true professionals telling their perspectives to the topic. I made a little experiment with ChatGPT earlier today, and I asked that what is this European Union AI Act? And it gave me an idea that there are certain kind of priorities or severity levels, and there are potentially big fines for the ones who are not compliant. And I noticed that there was a number 6%, because I do know it's 7%. So there is a little hallucination mistake there. Then I typed to the ChatGPT that, I have seen some other sources who claim that the penalty is not 6%. And it works differently now. So actually then there was a prompt saying that let me check 6 different sources. And some 20 seconds later, it said, indeed, it is 7%. So it corrected itself. But hey, before we let our main speakers talk today, let's hear some short news update from Finnish Center for Artificial Intelligence. So Docent Patrick Florén, please.
Thank you, Petri. Patrick Florén from FCAI, as we usually say incorrectly. It's easier to say than FCAI. So the Finnish Center for AI, which is doing research, and the core is with Aalto University, University of Helsinki and VTT. We have also all kinds of events where you are welcome to participate in. So the next ones that are coming up, we have one seminar on Tuominen in Kumpula, where Andrew Cropper from Oxford is telling about his work. This is really a more scientific talk. But then we have an Industry and Society webinar. We have in FCAI a program called the Industry and Society Program, and we have a series of webinars. And the next webinar, so that's completely online, is about AI-driven design of materials. But I wanted to say about this topic, actually, I don't know how many of you read Yliopistolehti, the Helsinki University magazine. I have there a column in the latest number about exactly the topic that we have here, about what the EU has been doing with the AI Act. And I saw that the text you had from ChatGPT was a little bit incorrect. It said that it will enter into force in 2024 to 25. It's entering into force 1st of August 2024. So AI Act is here and is in force. And we have heard, within FCAI, we have listened to the lawyers, and we also have a program called AI in Society. So this is a topic that is something that FCAI is interested in. And some lawyers say that, this is nothing, this AI Act, that anyways the companies should do all these kinds of things to, in a way, note what material they have used for the data and all this thing. This is normal thing that everybody should do anyways. And others say that, okay, well, the companies are unsure about what the AI Act really means, which means again that the companies will be reluctant to go forward with AI projects because they are unsure about where the situation is. So now it will be very interesting to see what we will see and hear what we will learn from the talks that we will see in a moment. So thanks for my part.
Thank you, Patrick. And FI events, there is a ever-living list of events in Helsinki and Finland. We have 3 sets of speeches today, each around 20 minutes. And let's take the questions at the end. And those 472 persons currently watching us online, there's a way in the chat environment to post your questions as well. So first we have a dynamic duo from Roschier, leading Nordic, what's the right term? Law firm. I was looking for a longer presentation there, but you have 20 minutes, so it's 5:03. You have till 5:23. The stage is yours, please.
Thank you so much, and good evening, everybody. Nice to see so many of you here and online. My name is Pauliina Vilponen. I'm attorney at law from Roschier Attorneys, as introduced, and here today with me I have Emma Swahne, as well, an attorney at law, and we have both been working with everything intellectual property and technology related for many years, and now since the GDPR entered into force more and more on everything related to data, cybersecurity, and now of course also AI. And our topic today is, first of all, to give a really brief introduction, unfortunately, to the AI and Data Acts, as in 20 minutes we don't have enough time to dive deep. And then we will focus at the end of our speech a little bit on the key contractual considerations that relate to these acts. Good. We wanted to start with a timeline. This is just to give you the idea that many of you for sure know that the regulation at EU level on data and technology is nothing new. Everything started already in the early 2000s when the e-privacy directive came into force. Then we had the GDPR in 2016, and now we are in 2024 talking about data and AI acts. And if something, the amount of legislation has only increased. And on the right side of the slide, you can also see that it will not end here. There's new legislation coming all the time. And one of the key pieces of legislation that relates to artificial intelligence is the Artificial Intelligence Liability Directive that is currently in draft form. So we don't know the final wording of that piece of legislation, but basically it will be on regulating the damages that will be available to individuals possibly suffering damage from AI.
And maybe to mention the data and digitalization regulations are supplemented by the cyber security regulations that are still in the pipeline. Some of them are ready, and many of those apply to connected devices, and that's why also are relevant in the context of AI.
Yes. But let's jump into the AI Act, what we are talking about today. So I wanted to start with a slide where you can see artificial intelligence in the middle of the so-called flower that I would like to say the figure. So in the EU, there is already a lot of legislation that could potentially apply to AI. So for us, at least for us lawyers, it was quite interesting that the EU considered that artificial intelligence needs to be regulated as standalone. And we at least think that, or I think that it relates to the risks that the new advanced large language models pose. And there are different kinds of items that then were collected into one piece of legislation. And basically what the AI Act is, it is product liability legislation. It is a framework to ensure safe and ethical use of AI in the EU, but in the essence, the regulators have wanted to ensure that the systems that are put on the market in the EU, they are safe enough, safe for the users to use and deploy. And the whole act is based on a risk-based approach, which I will dive a little bit deeper on the following slides. But it means that in the AI Act, the AI systems are divided into different risk categories, and depending on which category and system falls, then the deployers, providers, and other actors in the value chain have different obligations. On the last bullet point, I just put a brief note that we are not focusing on the general purpose AI model regulation that there also is in the AI Act. That's a separate item, so I will dive a little bit deeper on the general risk-based approach that the Act takes. here's a beautiful pyramid. I think at least for me, this was quite easy to understand when I first saw the pyramid. So starting from the highest risk category, so the unacceptable risks and prohibited AI practices. So the AI Act, coming from the ethical perspective, it first of all wants to prohibit certain practices. And if you read through the text of the Act, the examples are actually quite self-explanatory. So if we look at the first one, the AI Act is prohibiting practices such as subliminal, manipulative, or deceptive techniques to distort behavior. So basically anything that would be too harmful for individuals, would cause too much damage, and that's why the regulator has wanted to completely prohibit those practices. Then the second category, which is the most interesting and where the most compliance obligations apply to, is the high-risk AI system category. So here we have different systems, for example, which are already covered by EU harmonization legislation, such as medical device software, a good example, or then AI systems for safety in digital infrastructure, road traffic, water, gas, etc. So many different systems which impose higher risk on the deployers, but which are not such that should be prohibited altogether. And then below those, we have two additional categories. The limited risk AI system category, it includes systems such as those that are intended to interact directly with individuals, such as chatbots, or then synthetic systems generating synthetic audio, image, video, or text content. So those are in the limited risk category. And then the last one, I included it here, minimal risk category. The obligations of the AI Act do not basically apply to that category, but there are some, of course, encouragement to voluntarily follow some of the codes of conduct and implement those. And keeping the same pyramid, but then going a little bit deeper on the obligations that relate to these different categories. As said, the first category, if an AI system belongs to that one, use of it is prohibited. So nobody cannot use it, it cannot be put on the EU market, and the rules are, in that sense, quite clear. Then the second category, which I already mentioned, most of the compliance obligations relate to this risk category. So the main one being high-risk AI systems need to be CE marked. So now you see why I mentioned product liability legislation. So these high-risk AI systems, such as the ones that constitute medical device software, they need to go through a conformity assessment route and obtain the CE marking before they can be placed on the market. And the obligations, of course, the CE marking is the obligation of the provider, but there are different obligations also for deployers, importers, and distributors. Then the third category, limited risk systems, they have some transparency obligations. I myself like to think that more sort of like, if you think in the GDPR context, it would be like providing a privacy policy. The same applies here when you are a provider or deployer of a limited risk AI system. You need to give information about how the system works to the users. And then the last category, as said, minimal risk, no mandatory obligations following from the Act. Good.
Thanks, Pauliina. And then briefly about the Data Act, I tried to calculate backwards how many minutes we have, but I didn't success because I'm a lawyer, but we are doing our best to keep the time. As a background, I'm talking mainly from the B2B perspective, being mindful of the time and the scope of the Data Act, and focusing on points that are important when you go to the contracts. The Data Act applies to the data that is generated from connected products and related services, so mainly everything that's connected to any network. It can be also internal network. It doesn't have to be even public network. For example, heavy machinery vehicles, home appliances, medical devices, cloud services, edge services, wearable technology, whatever there may be. It creates new rights and obligations across different kind of stakeholders, and the parties that are defined in the Act are data holders, the ones who store or generate the data, or are the manufacturers of those connected products or services that are related to those products. Then there are these users, meaning, for example, the company that makes use of the paper machine. The paper company has paper machine that's connected to the network. The paper company is, or the pulp mill is the user. And then there are data recipients who are third parties, for example, support service providers to these products and services, or replacement services, add-ons, whatever there may be. And the Data Act is intended to be technology neutral as GDPR. Maybe it's not that successful, but still, that's the rationale behind there, and that's why the terminology is as it is. Data Act also provides for cloud and other data processing services for public sector bodies, banks, EU bodies, and participants in data spaces, but now I'm focusing on the first three because they are mostly relevant in the private sector. So accordingly, it applies to the lots of everything that's in the space of Internet of Things, and that's why AI is quite relevant also for AI models. They widely use this type of, or they are used in these type of products and services, and there are lots of potential for future developments. And this type of, the Data Act should be taken already into account when developing the future products and services, because when it comes applicable, it's required that these products and services by design enable the Data Act requirement on fair access and use of data. Sorry for a small font. I'm a lawyer again. This is how we do our slides. The users of data, meaning those that are using the product or related service, they need to be provided with access to that data in the product or service. It covers only data that's designed to be retrieved, but it also covers the data designed to be retrieved by the manufacturer or provider of the service. So if you want to have access some data, or you want to make it accessible for you, for example, for purposes of service improvement, it likely becomes to the scope of the Data Act. It has to be provided free of charge. Primarily, it should be made directly accessible, which is quite challenging for many legacy products and services. But secondly, it has to be provided at request. It has to be in usable format. It has to be made accompanied with metadata that it's needed to use that data. Secondly, the data holders must give activity data of their machines and services generated from the use of the users for data recipients upon request of the user. For example, if you are a developer of a windmill for which you are providing some sort of energy automation service and they want to have a new supplier, you need to provide access to that data. So there are certain thresholds, certain limitations, but certain safeguards for this, but mainly the data holders cannot refuse from granting the access. There can be certain technical limitations on further use. You can try to, sorry for saying try, maybe that's my personal opinion. You can protect your trade secrets to a certain extent, for example, by contractual means. In both of these cases, the Act provides for how the contracting should be made. In first case, obviously, you cannot exempt from the requirements of the Data Act. In second, and you just have to provide the contract terms, how you will comply, how you will make the data available. And in second case, you can do some decision-making on the contract terms, but those must be, in any case, fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. And when it comes to the money, Data Act implements so-called FRAND terms. These are duplicated from patent legislation, and they aim that by making compensation models are not created thresholds for access to the data. So data is in particular made available in price that is possible for the small and medium enterprises who are trying to develop their own, for example, services and products. There are certain exceptions, for example, that you don't need to make available your test data for some demo products that you have or that you are developing, so your R&D data doesn't need to be disclosed. Then there are some provisions on, for example, on switching between cloud services and providers, but I think we are not going there due to time. But in a nutshell, the Data Act has a direct impact on AI systems and related services because it affects the development and design of the services. It requires that the data can be accessible, not by you, but also made accessible to others. It needs to be in certain form, and you have to plan how you will do this. Secondly, it also applies to collection and protection of data, depending on which side you are. You may be benefiting, or you may find this challenging to a certain extent. It also has certain provisions that are not here that refer how the manufacturer of the product or provider of the service may use the data that's generated from their own products that are put into markets. And then obviously it provides for the price of the data, and some have maybe heard that data is a new oil, so there's a great impact on that. And this is how we have set these different kind of relationships to understand how to build, for example, contract change, how to determine the liabilities, how to create different type of models in this space between the relevant stakeholders. And then finally, a few key considerations for contracts that relate to the Data Act and AI Act. It's really important to understand your role. It's in the beginning and it's also in the end. It's important to understand where you are in the contract chain, towards which parties you need to secure, for example, your IPR, your trade secrets as today, but now you have to also consider how these acts may affect to your agreements or the agreements of your parties. If you have agreed with your party on certain type of arrangement when it comes to data, but they need to, subject to law, for example, disclose this data to third parties, that may directly apply how you wish to contract with your party. Then the compliance requirements, as Pauliina described, the AI Act is heavily depending on a risk-based approach that always comes with the compliance cost. Then your contract needs to provide on data access rights, the scope and the means. There are some leeway how you can limit the access, the data portability measures, how you want to do it, because obviously there's a cost. You should agree in advance how it will be done, and it's even required under the Data Act. Then briefly about the intellectual property and confidentiality.
Yeah. And that's why we have included the figure here. So one of the key issues that often comes to our table relating to AI systems and the data that is used to train the AI system and then also used as input when the AI model is being deployed, and then of course relating to the output. So basically the key IP intellectual property assets that there are for companies to protect their AI systems are copyrights and trade secrets. And those relate especially to the materials on the left side of the figure, so to the training materials and input materials in deployments. So in agreements, companies need to ensure if something is being developed, first of all, they need to ensure who has rights to these data sets, how they can be deployed, implemented, used in the development, and then how that should be put into contractual terms. Then, of course, the AI system itself, who owns the system, how that should be regulated, who has the right to use it, and who has the sole right to potentially use it and then deploy it after the development. And then the last point, output, and it's not by chance that it's the darkest one. Our current intellectual property legislation does not apply that well to something that has been created by a machine. So our copyright legislation, for example, it comes from the perspective that a human being has developed something that is protected by a copyright, and then that work is then subject to the copyright legislation. But that's the same rules do not apply to work or output produced by AI systems. So that is something that then needs to be taken into account in the contract, and the parties need to be really careful in drafting the IP clauses.
Yes, maybe as a final note,
Yeah.
this is something that's been contract for ages, the intellectual property, trade secrets, the liability, governance, audits, but now it's affected by external force, meaning the regulation, and that's why also some legacy contracts needs to be revisited, but maybe I think for AI developers and AI systems, it's important to think the future impacts. I think that's
Exactly. I would maybe add one point. When we talk about contracts, it is also the first thing that is important to consider is how AI is connected to the contract. It can be that a ready-made AI system is used and deployed in connection to the contract. It can be that something is developed altogether or something else. So everything should start, and the same considerations apply irrespective of what is the use case of AI in that specific collaboration or contract.
And now we got too excited and we are overdue and we will leave the stage.
Thank you, Pauliina. Thank you, Emma. I at least got a whole bunch of questions in my mind, but let's take all the questions at the end. The next topic or presenter is Saara Hyvönen from the sponsor of this event, DAIN Studios. So Saara, 20 minutes, please.
Thank you. So indeed, I'm Saara Hyvönen from DAIN Studios, working a lot with data and AI and also on these type of topics. And we are all concerned about the 20 minutes as a short time, and I have solved this now by narrowing the scope of this talk into one particular topic that is now part of the EU AI Act, AI literacy. So we will be talking about it from a compliance point of view, but also from a business point of view. But let's start first by why do we need this? So one thing we already heard about was the high-risk AI systems, and one of these high-risk areas is AI in recruitment. This example case, there's a link somewhere on the fine print, is a makeup artist who after COVID, the whole company was told to reapply for their own jobs. And she excelled in all the other marks, but the AI used to kind of do the job interviews, labeled her body language as poor. So she got fired. And obviously there wasn't a very good rationale why and what was now behind this scoring. In a typical US fashion, it was then settled outside of court, and later I think it was HireVue, who was the owner of that platform, then also removed this feature from their platform. So all good now, but showing that in applying AI, you might then run into these kind of compliance risks. But it's not only compliance risks that we're talking about, we're also talking about business risks. This is the Air Canada case that I have here as an example, where Air Canada wanted to speed up their customer care and hire an AI to do their customer service. And the customer service then hallucinated a benefit for a customer, saying that, of course, you can buy full price tickets to fly to your grandma's funeral and then apply for this bereavement fare then later on. This didn't exist, and Air Canada tried to say that, you know, it wasn't us, it was the AI, but it didn't work. So the jury was very much held Air Canada as responsible for giving that bad advice. And of course, that's the way it should be. If you start using AI, then you are responsible for how it is then doing in that job. But the risks aren't the only things why we're talking about AI literacy. We have just, I think, all gotten used to using ChatGPT and all kinds of things. So write me a blog about fruit flies. But where we should be going at this moment is then thinking about not just ChatGPT, but actually talking about agents. So essentially agentic solution means that you have several different kind of AIs in your team. One is a copywriter, one is an editor, one is looking for SEO, one is photo research and so forth. So you can have different types of roles all presented by the AI. And these kind of rapid evolutions from one technology to then kind of novel ways of combining them and applying them, this is something that, of course, if we want to be on top of things, then we need to constantly be upskilling, and that's what AI literacy is very much about. But we have a direct connection also to the EU AI Act. So quite simply, there's an article talking about AI literacy saying that if you provide or deploy AI systems, then you may have to make sure that all those people that are somehow dealing with that operations or use of the AI systems need to be AI literate. You need to kind of take into account, first of all, who these people are, what they know beforehand. You need to take into account the context of where the AI is used. And then you have to think about the people who are at the end of the chain, so who are then impacted by this AI. And this is now kind of simply mandated, so you need to have this in place. Of course, this then raises the question on, well, okay, AI literate, we have to be AI literate, but what is it? What does it mean to be AI literate? And of course, there are as many definitions as there are definers, but this is, I think, quite a nice definition. So it's it's a set of skills and competencies that is required to understand, use, and effectively interact with AI technologies and applications. So it's not only about understanding technology, but it's about understanding what are the opportunities, kind of really having a critical eye on the context of where AI is being applied, being able to a bit question things. Is this the right scope? Is this the right way to implement things? And recognizing benefits, but also challenges in this. So it's really about quite a large set of skills. So going into a bit more detail, and here's also a bit of a fine print here. So basically what we're talking about is understanding the AI and machine learning concept. So you have to have a certain level of technical understanding. You need to be able to define opportunities and problems that we can use AI to solve, and also evaluate the suitable solutions. You need to be able to interpret what is this input, what is the output? Does this make sense? I think that's one of the really, really key skills you need to have there. And of course, then there's the AI considerations about bias, explainability, and so forth. There's then a set of different ways, of course, that AI can be applied, and this is then depending a bit on your role and where you're doing where you're using AI. Then this is something that you would need to also have an understanding on, whether talking about optimization, personalization, or systems that enhance human capabilities, either an individual using AI tools or then whole processes. On the AI and compliance considerations, we already mentioned kind of bias and fairness, but of course there are lots of other things. You need to understand how to mitigate hallucinations, how to make sure that your AI isn't kind of violating copyrights or somehow behaving completely unexpectedly in ways that you didn't want your AI to do. And of course, then there are lots of implications also if we look forward about where AI is going. We mentioned the agents, but kind of all this kind of widespread automation of processes, moving into human in the loop situations. There are all kinds of shifts that then also need kind of more understanding of the role you have in this system that you're operating. And then a number of challenges about balancing intuition, biases, and big questions as well. How does AI impact jobs overall? So this is kind of all part of the AI literacy package. Putting it into a bit of 3 buckets, so we can talk about things that we could talk about people skills, so understanding and describing the problems to the AI, verifying the results, and understanding overall the processes. We can talk about process things, how to ensure that human judgment still is kind of remains in the loop in the decision-making process, and thinking about what kind of tools and how do humans and these AI tools collaborate together to then make kind of better, more optimal solutions. And then there's the principle sides on the compliance topics, but also then things like working principles for how AI should be used as an assistant. What rules and guidelines do you have? How in your company do you use ChatGPT? Or as an independent agent, how do you monitor your agent that you have built to help you? And so kind of what is clear is that we need to adapt in many ways. So whereas previously we can think of developing machine learning models has been a skill that is in high demand, and it still is. But now the shift is going on more into the focusing on the problem identification. That's the kind of bottleneck skill. Understanding how to conceptualize what is it that we try to do. Understanding and accurately describing the problems. So this is really kind of not only describing the, say, business problem or context, but really translating into how do we use AI to solve this problem. And then moving a bit onwards into this, well, I find it always a bit funny to talk about human-machine collaboration, but that's really what we're doing when we're interacting with AI to solve a certain process. So understanding how does that work, what kind of AI do I need to solve this process, or solve this question about how I optimize or integrate AI into my process. And evaluating the outputs, so super critical in understanding that you're not in a garbage in, garbage out situation, but actually get the things that you wanted to do. And also understanding how the human intervention, where is it needed, and how does it work. This is now a bit kind of, we're not going into the fine print here, but just wanting to highlight that there are different levels how we want to kind of interact with AI. In the first individual play situation, it's really about me and my ChatGPT or whatever working together. But then when we start going into these more process-oriented things, so really looking about cross-functions, marketing processes, customer care processes, then it already changes. We need tooling and thinking of how these things work together. And of course, then if we go into the whole company slide or ecosystem play, then we're yet in a different and more complex situation. What this means in practice is that AI literacy means different things for different groups. So there are certain skills that everybody needs. So you need basic data and AI understanding, describing the problems. We talked about these things already a lot, understanding the fundamentals, and then you need a basic knowledge of regulatory landscape as well. But then, in addition to these, then on the C level, you need then other skills as well. You need to understand the strategic and operative data and AI and the enablement. So how do you leverage data at scale? What are the things that need to change? Not only technologies, but people, processes, organizations. How do you drive that kind of AI business transformation across the whole organization? Then if you AI used in a specific area, then you are talking about more specific things. How do I work with AI agents in my domain? What are the data sources? How can I validate them? What are the right toolings? And what are the domain-specific considerations I should be thinking about? And then if you're in the AI, data and AI expert level, so then we're talking about already AI development and deployment. What are the best practices? How do I, about data, but also about how do I profile data, how to ensure my data is in order, what kind of monitoring practices do I need in place, what are the things that I need to kind of do to check for bias and so forth. So very concrete, you can have then a whole list of check marks in what I really need to do. So it really means different things for different people, but there are kind of commonalities, and this is a kind of super complicated, and I'll walk you through it quite quickly. So this example is now about measuring fairness in, so what we always want is AI to be fair. But what does fair mean? You have all kinds of questions here. You start from the top. Are you interested more in representation or errors? Is what you're doing, is it more punitive, like does this guy go to jail, or is it assistive, does this guy get a loan? Are we talking about small or large populations? So if we take an example of, for example, a loan decision, then you would say, I don't want errors, this is an assistive thing, we're talking about large populations, and what I'm really interested in is that there's no significant difference between males and females among those who did not get the loan. So I'm ending up in the slightly less red orange box in the bottom row. But in a different kind of a context, you would end up in a different cell. And why am I showing this? This is not a technical exercise. I mean, it looks like a bit like what kind of, so the bottommost row looks like kind of statistical terms. Are we talking about equal parity and so forth? But what it really is about, that if you're kind of the guy who needs to decide who gets a loan and what is our logic there, you need to understand also these kind of things, that there is a difference between, you can't just tell the guy that, yeah, it needs to be fair, but you actually need to understand that fairness might mean different things in different contexts, and it goes into a certain level of nitty-gritty detail when you pose that question. So, I think I've been talking a lot about why is data and AI literacy skills important, but this is now a kind of summary of that. So when we have a data and AI literate team, it can work independently with data and technologies, collaborate to define problems, constantly learn new things and keep up with the technologies. Use technology strategically, justify work with data, comprehend and critique data and AI outputs. Also exercise empathy from other perspectives, so making sure that the ethical considerations are there. And also enhance mutual understanding, so build that kind of cohesion. And this is really kind of something that you need to have in place to make AI compliant, but also to make it a business success. And I think this is a good place. I have one last slide, but I'm not sure if I'm already out of time.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll do my last slide then. So it's about what can you then do to improve your data and AI literacy in your teams. So there are certain topics on the people side, and it's really kind of starting with training. So making sure that you go through all those basic things with the team. Then it's also about spreading that knowledge across the organization. So making sure that it's not, you don't just have a small group of people who know the stuff, but also the knowledge is spread across the organizations. And fostering this kind of experimenting culture, so being kind of open to test and feedback on topics, and collaborate on what should be done and what not. And then on the process side, you need kind of then to have the processes in place. And now we're talking about the processes that ensure that AI is used in a sensible and compliant way. So you need to have kind of mandate and sponsor for the use, but then also make sure that you have the processes to ensure that you have the decision-making capability on who does what we do, what we don't do. And then on the technology side, of course, you need to empower people with the right technology and tools so that they can actually then work to use AI in the company. And that is it for today. Except
with the questions at the end.
Yeah.
I think what that made me to think was that what type of diversity you need a team to be compliant. And as it happens, from PwC we have Tuominen, who I believe is one of the first experts in Finland who have certified yourself on AI governance topics.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So for the next 20 minutes, let's really kind of learn that what needs to happen, at least in the bigger companies, to build the teams and the processes and the ways to secure that all this can become true. Anna, please.
Okay, thank you. So good evening. My name is Tuominen, and I'm working for PwC Finland at the Risk Assurance Services. And I will today tell you some practical tips and ideas how to ensure the AI Act compliance. And as we heard from the previous presentations, the regulatory landscape in Europe is constantly evolving and expanding. There are a lot of new data-related regulatory coming or already effective. And the AI Act was published in August this year. And it has a lot of obligations, especially for a high-risk AI system provider. And when I studied the AI Act, my first impression was that, hey, if I would be developing a high-risk AI system and launching it in the European market, I wouldn't be so sure if I would like to launch it here in Europe, because there are so many requirements and obligations in this AI Act. So you need to have technical documentation and risk management system in place, and quality management system, and cybersecurity, and you need to conduct conformity assessments, and so on. There are a lot of obligations. But then I thought that actually, what is this AI Act all about? And I think it's all about governance. So all these obligations, they mean good governance of the AI technologies and systems. So if I would summarize in one sentence how to comply with the AI Act, I would say take good care of your AI governance and develop a AI governance model. And what is an AI governance model then? It's a framework, it's a systematic approach on how we develop and how we purchase and implement and deploy the AI systems and AI technologies, and how we manage the use of them. So all these processes, practices, principles, regulations that guide on the ethical and responsible use of the AI. And if it's not documented, it's quite impossible to evaluate the maturity of these processes and practices. And there is an ISO standard available, ISO 42001 AI management system, and this is one framework that can be utilized when developing an AI governance model, but remember that it's a management system standard, so it does not include the legal obligations which are stated in the AI Act. But anyhow, it's a good tool. But I will now present you some steps how you could proceed in your organization if you are considering that, hey, we should now start to develop an AI governance model. So what should we do? First of all, it's really important that you understand what is your role and responsibilities. So are you, or is your organization an AI system provider or a deployer, or perhaps you have both of the roles? And then it's also very important to understand and document the whole AI value chain. So for example, if you are using suppliers or subcontractors who provide products or components or services that become a part of your product and your service offering, and they have AI in their product, then you really need to understand all the risks related to the whole value chain, and then make agreements so that you have clear responsibilities, for example, in case of a major incident. So who is responsible for what? And the next step is then develop and document an inventory of your IA assets. So what kind of IA models and algorithms and AI systems and use cases you either develop by yourself or you purchase them. And you should also understand the risk classification of each of the assets. Because we heard already from the previous presentation that there are different obligations for different risk classifications. And one practical tip is there is an AI Act Explorer and AI Act compliance checker available in internet. I highly recommend that you check that out. It's a very intuitive way of seeing what is important for your company depending on your role and your AI systems risk classification. Then the next step is perform a current state assessment and understand your current processes and where are the main gaps and what are the main risks. And then I also recommend that you start a compliance program or AI governance model program or project, because if you organize it as a project, then you will have clear targets and follow-up and milestones and resources. And it's important that the project team is cross-functional. So the AI governance model development is not an IT exercise only. You need IT, but you also need your legal team and your security, your privacy, data protection. You need your risk management, compliance, but most of all, you need your business teams there. So remember, it's not an IT exercise. And then there are also other regulatory requirements, not only AI Act. So we already heard from the previous presentations that you should also remember the product liability and product safety, GDPR, and copyright issues, and so on. Then the next one is when you develop an IA system or when you purchase it from outside, it's important that you integrate already from the very beginning all these elements, so privacy and data governance and security, and implement controls already from the beginning and continuously monitor the controls. And it's also important that you will establish ethical principles and common AI terminology for your organization. So the ethical principles guide the way how you utilize the AI system, so what it can be used for and what it cannot be used for. And the training and awareness are important elements of the AI governance model. And then the transparency, we already heard that it's important that the employees know that you utilize AI systems, but also your customers need to know, for example, if you are making decisions by AI and the decisions will affect your customers, they have to know it. And if you, for example, they need to know if they are interacting with a machine or a human being. And if you are an AI system provider, then a good practice is to develop a model card or a system card, which is a document that describes what is the intended use of that AI model and what data has been used for training it and what are the performance metrics, so what kind of test results are documented out of the AI model testing. And finally, I recommend that you will not create a separate AI management team, but integrate this AI governance model in your existing management structures. So you don't have to make another management framework for AI. Risk assessments, they are part of this AI governance model, but I will briefly explain some of those risk assessments which are required by EU regulations. So always when an organization applies new technology, they have to conduct a data protection impact assessment, and AI can be seen as a new technology. So if you are, for example, implementing Microsoft Copilot, you should first conduct a data protection impact assessment, and that comes from the EU GDPR. But then the EU AI Act requires that if you are implementing a high-risk AI system, then you should conduct a fundamental rights impact assessment. And this applies to public administration and those private companies who are providing public services. But I recommend that in practice you should then combine these two assessments because they have so many similarities. So I think it's wise to have them combined. And then conformity assessment, if you are a provider of a high-risk AI system, before launching this system to the market, you should conduct a conformity assessment, and the declaration of the conformity must be published in the EU database, which is hosted by the EU Commission, the AI Office. And it's a public database, so anybody can then see what are the commercial high-risk AI systems that are available and what kind of risks they have. Then there are also other assessments which are not regulatory. And in the figure, I have listed some examples of risks for each AI system lifecycle phase. But this is not a comprehensive list, but some risks are mentioned here. And then also some examples of the controls that you might want to implement in order to demonstrate the accountability and demonstrate the compliance with the AI Act. So there are technical measures and there are organizational measures and ethical measures, and these are examples. Then I already mentioned this ISO standard, this ISO 42001 AI management system, and it has an Annex A, which includes in all 39 controls. So I recommend that you also check out them because they can be also useful when developing an AI governance model. And finally, some additional resources. I already mentioned this AI Act Explorer and AI Act Compliance Checker. Very, very nice tools. I really recommend them. Then there is an AI risk repository also available in internet. Examples of typical AI-related risks. This is also very, very nice. And then this ISO standard that I already mentioned. So I think I have used my time almost. So feel free to contact me in LinkedIn or send me an email to PwC. We can also assist you if you need help with the risk assessments or the current state assessments or AI governance model development. So PwC is willing to help you with these topics. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and thank you for inviting me here, Petri.
Don't escape, quite the contrary. Okay. Everybody back to the stage, please. Actually, you were ahead of time, but nevertheless, trivial, easy? No. Wow. Let me first take the first two questions from the stream, and let's see who then should answer this. First one. Does the law make a difference, or the Act, does the Act make a difference between regulating AI research versus regulating AI applications or services?
What was the first word?
Is the research versus business?
Yeah, so the AI Act is regulating from the risk-based approach is regulating on the systems, and then the systems can be used for different purposes. So I would say that research is then a purpose, and it comes from the, you need to think about the system and then about the purpose, and then try to see where it comes in the, I don't know if, no.
Pass the microphone to or do you have, Patrick, a microphone there? Yeah. Please feel free
you know
to
better.
Research is excluded from
yeah.
Yes, research is excluded. There's a paragraph saying research is excluded. But the other point is, of course, that if something from the research is then going to be a product, then you're in it, because it is about deployment. So also for research, you must be aware about this, because the research can result in something that goes to the market.
Yeah, good.
Thanks, Patrick. Second question from the stream: which industries are going to have the hardest time with these new compliance requirements? Actually, I think let's make a whole round there, starting from Saara.
Yeah. really difficult question. I would say that of course it hits first the ones working in these high-risk areas. So if you are working in that list that we saw there earlier, working on AI for recruitment, AI for education, then this is where I think you first have to, or I think these companies are probably at this moment already very aware of these topics. So that's where kind of the let's say the focus goes first. We talk a lot about kind of this AI Act, and I think it's all good, but then the truth is that many businesses are working in this kind of low-risk areas, and of course then there's still the transparency, there's still a lot to do with AI governance, and it's a kind of a sanity thing also. You need to know what you're doing, and that's why I also was talking about AI literacy, also not from only a compliance but a business perspective. So of course it impacts everything, but then the biggest questions are really on the high-risk area.
Emma?
Well, I'm not sure about the industries, but I would, based on our experience on new regulation, typically those who are mostly regulated by the new regulation are already regulated, so they are used to having compliance processes and governances in place. When, for example, GDPR became enforced, those who deemed that we don't process any personal data were hit hardest because everybody processed personal data, and I would claim that any company, for example, using automation could become in the scope of the AI Act. So there are two sides.
Yeah, maybe I could mention a few that I've encountered in practice. So one that applies to all companies is HR use, where we have also seen a lot of maybe in recruitment tools is one example. And then also what is close to my heart is the medical device sector, where there are also a lot of development, and what will be interesting to see how the CE marking conformity assessment rules of the Medical Device and AI Act will then intertwine and go together. So yeah, those two areas.
Anna?
Yeah, I would also say medical devices and healthcare, maybe.
All right, let's take a question of you from the room. I think gentleman over there with the glasses was the first one to have hand up, and then I think Petri was the next one.
Hi, Pasi Pölönen. I have a question that, there's a number of family companies and mid-sized companies in Finland. So any hope with AI on them from a regulatory point of view, or is it kind of a hands up and you can't really use AI?
So small and medium-sized companies, is this, can they ignore that, or?
I don't think that's the way you should be taken.
Not necessarily ignore, but yeah. Is there a light way, or if you use just ChatGPT or OpenAI product platforms, can you kind of bypass most of the steps? Obviously, you need to be aware, but...
But I think there exactly this point that many applications are not high-risk applications. So we tend to talk about EU AI Act like the high-risk application is. I mean, it has the most requirements. And of course, in that sense, it is central to it. But many applications, if you talk about, think of it from that perspective, are not high risk, and then it still makes sense to have certain sanity checks, transparency, kind of think about how you're using, and especially if you're you're a one-man company, and then you tell ChatGPT to analyze your kind of job applicants, then maybe you need to think about the risks there. But otherwise, kind of a lot of the stuff is happening in the kind of not high risk area. So in that sense, small companies can, I mean, still, it's good to be aware, and it's good to kind of make that judgment of where am I in this risk, where are my cases. But if they are mostly on the low risk, then there is little to do.
Yeah, and maybe as a complementary comment, if you are the user side, then there are not that many applications. Most of the applications go to the developer and application side, so that helps in a sense.
Exactly, and also the first thing, the most important thing is to identify where the AI is used, which systems, and how different teams, different people in the organization use it. So that is already the first step, and then it helps a lot going forward.
Yeah, the AI literacy, it covers all companies.
All right, let's pass the microphone to Professor Director Petri Malmelin. But before you ask your question for the audience here, Petri was nominated in the AI Gala just about a week ago, an honor of being AI Society Influencer of Finland. So big thanks, Petri, for running FKI and Heat of Finland. Now your question, please.
Thanks a lot, Petri. So let's see if I have a question. First of all, great talks. Thank you all for giving this. I was really kind of inspired. Maybe one question, many people are thinking like, okay, I'm building a product or a service. Is it AI or not? I have been involved with the AI Act and the definition that is there, which is modified OECD definition. I don't think it means anything. And I think this is exactly right. Because as was said, we are focusing on risks and this is products and services. So the technology is secondary. And if you are working in a high-risk area, whatever your company is or your organization is, I would advise to assume that somebody will tell you that it is AI and act accordingly, just to be on the safe side. So maybe something regarding this kind of maybe SMEs and smaller companies. I think the biggest fear I have is that this, at first sight, this sounds terrible. I mean, like lots of obligations, but like as you very well tried to explain, that it's not that difficult. I mean, like it's like good governance and good documentation and kind of testing, validation, all that. Like maybe I hope that somebody in Europe would say, and maybe the practices when they emerge and the standards, and somebody will say that we are not targeting SMEs. Like if you do your best, but you miss one point in this AI Act or Data Act, we will forgive you and you can correct it and you will be not killed. I would like somebody big shot to say this out aloud, that this is not targeting you. If you do your best, just continue and apologize later. Maybe this is something like the Silicon Valley mindset that we can do this. So finally, I think most worried should be the big tech who is leading the AI development, since obviously they are not compliant with this regulation. Maybe I'm not a lawyer, so kind of I was a little bit surprised because I mean, like what they have been doing, OpenAI and Meta and Google and so forth, they have been taking all the data on the internet regardless of whether it's copyrighted or not. They didn't ask permission. They are obviously, I think we all agree that they are obviously violating copyrights. So maybe it's good that we kind of enforce and say we have a couple of acts now enforced that say that this is not okay. In order to us to make sure that the products and services that you build, that they are safe, we need to be able to, you need to tell us like which data sets were used, how did you test this and so forth. So to me this sounds like, I mean, if cars would be invented now, who would buy a car when the manufacturer would say that I don't tell you which materials were used or how did we test that the brakes actually work and the car body will hold, like we have these wonderful NCAP tests now. I mean, like this is not rocket science. I think this is just common sense. And I believe that the big tech has to bend because there's no other way. I mean, like there are rules also in the digital world. So maybe the question was like, am I on the right track? I try to be positive here and not to say people that don't be too alarmed, like just wait and let's see how this works out, and I'm positive, and this is not such a big deal for many of us.
So
do you agree?
Is Petri on the right track? Who wants to comment?
I could comment from the experience that we have gathered from the clients. Most clients have taken the AI Act regulation as part of, as you said, of their normal processes. So they don't try to approach this as something big and new, but to take it as a new regulation and see how it fits into what already exists. So that helps a lot into getting into the processes and not seeing and reviewing it as a huge new deal.
Yeah, I think nobody's probably eager to say that you don't need to care if you're small. That would give the wrong signal. But I think, first of all, what you said, kind of, if you ask the question, is this AI or not, you probably should treat it as AI. It's kind of going into semantics of what kind of AI is good enough. AI is not good. But then, like what was already said, the requirements, especially if you're not on the high risk, but even in the high risk, are really kind of basic sanity things, documentation, governance. You know what data goes in, you keep an eye on it. You make sure that it doesn't automatically make bad decisions all the time, and you have no idea. I mean, you can't do the Air Canada thing that it was the AI, it wasn't us.
Somebody wants to comment from the audience, please.
That was super interesting. So Nina Hagman from DAIN Studios also. Hi everyone. Thanks for lovely presentations. So maybe to this one. So for the big players. So again, the unfortunate truth is that we are in global competition. So it's not only Europe, so also China, US. They are also then making applications, making business, and to be honest, they don't care that much. And we are competing against them, so this is the thing that we also need to keep in mind. So not to regulate us to death, but to keep really viable competition. And then the second topic maybe being, and also maybe a question, so now exactly, so what would be your advice, especially not only for the SMEs, but in the kind of like sense what Saara also told, that striking for the balance between this risk mitigation and really leveraging the opportunities, because very soon all this regulation somehow will be outdated. What we already see with agentic AI, so all the lines are getting blurrier and blurrier, and AI basically merges itself to every possible application possible. So any wise words for this one?
Embedded AI is coming and you don't know where it is. Any thoughts?
Maybe a comment on legislation, because that's easier for me. Obviously, EU is looking for Brussels effect, and already US is having some incentives on the EU regulation, but we will see how they will do it, and how, for example, the big players will eventually react on Data Markets Act that hits them harder even than the AI Act. From legal perspective and strictly from compliance perspective, even that we try to be as practical as possible, we typically recommend to prioritize the business continuity, what's needed for the business continuity, which type of services are those that you have to keep on going. You need to be sure that they are not taken down, because the authority goes to your supplier and says, this is high risk, this cannot be put on the markets. Secondarily, what are the biggest, for example, IPR resources that you need, how the AI impacts those, and then start working on the compliance from these priorities. This is one suggestion for the approach.
Patrick, please.
I have actually a comment about this, because I think what Petri said was right. You shouldn't really care of whether it's AI or not. And that solves partly your problem, because whatever you do, you can think, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's applicable. But remember what they said here. They said first, one thing they said was that most of the long text is not applicable to you. If you read the paragraphs, only a small part might be of interest to you. So it's not that complex, even though the whole thing is complex. And as has been said many times, very few things are high risk. And if it's not high risk, you're in the easy part. But I actually have a question to them too, but you wanted to comment on my...
Final point. Thanks, Patrick. Super good answer. So just the one nature, because again, so even for the not high-risk systems or the limited risk, so there is still the encouragement, very strong encouragement to document, do this and that. And again, so it's becoming harder and harder because again, as I said, lines are becoming blurrier and blurrier.
But in some ways, I guess exactly these things like documentation, you need to be able to tell what you're doing and what data you're using and how this overall works. They're also kind of common sense things. If you don't know what you're doing and why and with which tools, then you're missing some bits and pieces in your documentation. So I think this is also one way to approach it, and lots of those are kind of sanity checks in a sense that you want to know yourself that your AI is not going Air Canada, not putting all the blame on them, but making decisions that you then kind of hit you, even if it's not high risk. So.
Yes, and when it comes to the documentation, I think it's always good to remember that you don't have to do all the documentation yourself, in particular if you are making use of established tools. I think a good example is the transfer impact assessments under the GDPR. If you go to your supplier and ask for one, they probably have it. They will even provide a warranty on it if you just ask. So it's maybe good sometimes to go to the direct source of the information, because there are transparency obligations in the AI Act as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now we are in the beginning of the application of the legislation. So as with the GDPR and all the new legislation, examples will come. Other companies are struggling with the same issues. The authorities will provide more guidance, so it will get simpler quite fast, I would assume.
I had a question. I didn't ask my question yet because I let this discussion first go. My question is to you lawyers, because this is the GDPR, this is the AI Act, there's the data, whatever, all kinds of Data Service Act, Data Act, Data Market Act, whatever. Are there some laws or some paragraphs or some cases in this whole forest of different laws that are like contradictory? Is this a smooth legislation, or are there something that where you all know how it goes, that there are lots of discussions and the Commission is presenting a proposal, then the member states are changing, then the parliamentarians are voting paragraph by paragraph, and things can happen to the end result. So is it a smooth way, or are there contradictory things?
Definitely there are conflicts of laws, to be honest, and the EU authorities in preparations of the AI Act and Data Act have even stated that they are not going to fix everything by law. They aren't going to back to the legacy laws. They are going to provide authoritative guidance how to put this all together. I haven't seen any guidance. Yeah. GDPR has been there since 2016, being applied from 2018, but that's the case, and I would say that's one level. Luckily, these are acts. They are on the same level, but still we have directives, we have local laws, and for example, laws on employee privacy in Finland are one of the strictest in the world. They directly conflict with certain laws in the Europe by nature, and this is something that also requires prioritization, and it depends on the industry that you are. And if you leave aside AI and data-specific regulations, obviously you may need to have some sort of, if you are, for example, a bank, you have anti-money laundering, you need to use state-of-art tools to detect loss of customer data. You cannot use AI tools because in Finland those are prohibited by law, and these type of issues, they are really complex if you go there. My recommendation is not to go there unless you have to, but obviously it depends on the industry where it is, but relying on authorities' guidelines are a good way to go. But in certain cases, companies need to make choices in their compliance programs.
I think one good example of sort of contradictory paragraph is the reporting obligations. If you look in the big picture, the data and digitalization regulation, there are some reporting obligations in GDPR, then cybersecurity regulations, and the thresholds are all different. So GDPR, if there could be some harm to data subjects or so forth, and then we look at the cybersecurity regulation and there's different threshold. So what all companies need to do, they try to find similarities and then set forth internal limits when notify and who.
And that was the scary part. Now comes the relieving part. If you have done certain selections based on the compliance with laws, the authorities likely will not sanction you just if you are able to demonstrate why you have ended up to certain compliance solution, because obviously they need to, for example, cooperate in that type of situations, and you cannot be punished directly by complying with certain law if there is no alternative implementation to comply with both.
Let's take one final question from the audience here, and it's the lady behind Hugo. So.
Hi, Brianna here from Store Enzo. I'm a UX designer, so work in product design area, and I was interested to hear if you have any idea, like, what are your predictions for job titles or, kind of people who have AI literacy skills in the next years, because I could see it influencing product design as well. And how do you see that kind of changing the job market? Maybe it's more for Saara or the others. Yeah.
Excellent question. I don't have an excellent answer to that. My first answer would be that on the long run, kind of these data literacy skills are just going to be integrated into all roles, so not necessarily the role titles as such would change, but then saying this doesn't feel completely honest, because I do feel that there are probably kind of, if you think of these, kind of the example with, you can ask ChatGPT to write your blog, or you can have your agentic team, then of course that does require certain skill set to set it up and kind of operate with it, that might then result in some kind of a new title as well, but I don't think that it exists at the moment.
So currently what I have seen, it's been current roles being expanded. So it could be privacy, compliance, AI, so forth officer, so new things coming into existing roles, but yeah, as said, good change.
Wonderful. Looking at the clock, it says that the networking, we closed the broadcasting 25 past, and I think we are roughly there. So thanks everybody in the room here, and big thanks for those in the stream. So maybe a round of applause for the true experts of tonight here. Thank you. Next AI Monday in Helsinki takes place on Monday, 2nd of December. We are still working with the theme of that, but let's see if we can find equally inspiring and high expertise on that AI Monday. So please follow the AI, Monday.de, so it's a German website where the events are. And there are much more AI Monday events in Central Europe thanks to DAIN studios. So those of us in Finland can of course come over here, or we can also follow the broadcasted AI Mondays from various Central European cities. One last hand up there, please. Placeholder postings earlier. I know 3 gentlemen who this hurts. You are absolutely right there. All right, let's close the cameras, and 2nd of December is the next day on Monday. Thank you.